It sounds like the deep state is doing everything possible to provoke war, maybe World War III, so that Donald Trump is unable to promote peace. We are in a transition period, and somehow Joe Biden or whoever makes policies for him authorizes high-range missiles made in the United States and targeted to China and Russia through Ukraine. Just a few days after Donald Trump had agreed with Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky that they would together find out a way to end the Ukraine war. Probably military contractors need current wars to continue so that they can continue selling weapons. We hope that Vladimir Putin will be cold-blooded and understand that this is an outlier which does not represent long-range American policy, and that hopefully from Ukraine, no high-range missiles will be fired towards Russia. It remains to be seen what will happen. We can just hope that leaders will be cold-blooded. And we will have to wait until January 20, until Donald Trump himself gets the task upon himself. It is likely that Donald Trump will personally conduct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine and leave room for Marco Rubio to deal with China and Taiwan, Israel and Hamas, and of course Latin America. It is funny that people accuse Marco Rubio to be a war hawk, and we're already in lots of wars that have not been caused by Marco Rubio. On the Latin American front, there are issues due to various right-wing or left-wing governments in the Americas. Both Colombia and Bolivia have increased their coca leaves and cocaine production exponentially. Shipments of drugs through Venezuela to the United States and Europe are achieving record levels, and the decay of woke US and European society is caused by drugs. Even marijuana. A recent Kamala Harris commercial stated that marijuana legal trade was a perfect entrepreneurial opportunities for blacks. Why do you have to place a racial ethnicity into an addictive trade? Marijuana is supposed to be useful for artists and their creativity, but it's definitely not good for mathematicians, economists, and anyone who needs to make mathematical calculations sharply. Some writers used to say that alcohol consumption was good for writing because it let your ideas flow freely. It remains to be seen. Drug addiction is not the answer for this troubled world. We must make it profitable for sober industries to catch up. Leftist communist regimes depend on drug traffic, drug trade, drug consumption, and chronic illness of the world's population to gain and maintain power forever. So now you have Mexico also on the list of highly effective drug trafficking countries, and its current president, Claudia Sheinbaum, is herself a friend of all drug cartel capos or leaders. Mexico is quickly becoming a failed state in the manner that Cuba and Venezuela have long ago become, with a destroyed opposition and a Supreme Court that will end. It is necessary to get rid of the drug cartels. Nicolás Maduro, Claudia Sheinbaum are part of those drug cartels in Mexico and Venezuela, and so is Gustavo Petro in Colombia, and so is Luis Arce in Bolivia. Several countries in Latin America are run by drug trafficking organizations, and all they provide to the United States is an ample supply of drugs that make their way into United States colleges and universities to reduce the academic achievements of their students who feel compelled to study woke curricula, woke courses, which lack the academic rigor supposed to be prevailing in U.S. colleges and universities. And that has been happening during a few decades, but it's becoming more obvious now. And of course, human trafficking, drug cartels are also paving the way for illegal immigration, which commits crimes in the United States, aided by stupidization of population who spend their whole lives looking their next dose of a drug. Therefore, Marco Rubio must have ample authority to use the mighty power of the United States throughout Latin America to overthrow drug trafficking regimes. As he said, promoting peace by strength. We may have sanctions, we may have Helms-Burton law, we may have the recently approved Bolivar Congress project of law against Venezuelan government agencies, but none of that is enough. No sanctions will ever unseat a dictator, because dictators will strive to enhance their relationship with Iran and China. I may share with you the situation of Venezuela and their new allies China and Iran. Iran is also a country sanctioned by the United States, and probably sanctions against both Iran and Venezuela will increase. So both Iran and Venezuela are expanding the ties of their banking systems so that the two currencies can be interchanged quickly, circumventing sanctions. This becomes an excellent way to money laundering. All the money laundered through drug trafficking in the Americas can make its way to Venezuela and then transfer to Iran, so that there is even further financing for Iran's nuclear program and terrorism opportunities for Hamas and Hezbollah. China has become an important trading partner for Latin American countries because of United States red tape. Argentines, Uruguayans, Colombians complain, and possibly Peruvians too, because China just developed a huge deep water harbor port on Peru's Pacific coast. Many Latin American countries wish to export their produce to the United States, and there is red tape, there are environmental concerns. That should not be the case. China, of course, opens the doors for Latin American exports and then floods or dumps cheap imports. China has no history of human rights, and China tends to establish bilateral agreements with governments throughout Latin America, which are opaque and which lead usually to lots of corruption. And of course, China is a dictatorship. You never see a change of leadership in China. You never see regional elections. You never see a Senate. It is unbelievable to think that a country with so much population and no one is allowed to speak. It seems that the Chinese population is trained to act as goods and services producers, robots during their whole lives without any allowance for free thinking or creative development for a better society. That probably explains why, being China a great economic powerhouse, you still see many Chinese immigrants into other parts of the world, seeking freedom they don't have in their own country. And that is the system that is being exported into Latin America. So free thinkers of Latin America need to make tandem with free thinkers in the United States, which, thank God, are just gaining power, even though we have to wait until January 20 and hope that Putin or Biden or Zelensky do not start World War III with long-range missiles and nuclear threats. Since Donald Trump himself will probably make most life or death decisions in the wars of China, Taiwan, Hamas, Hezbollah, Israel, Russia, Ukraine, it is likely that Marco Rubio will have ample opportunities to design Latin American policy at his entire will, and Donald Trump will probably approve it, as previous advisors who were not Latin Americans he had before failed during the first administration. All right-wing governments in Latin America are extremely excited about Marco Rubio. So are all right-wing oppositions in Latin American countries that are governed by the left. That means that Marco Rubio has unanimous support throughout the Latin American right, which will be in power in the United States. So we must make a formidable alliance in the Americas following the Monroe Doctrine that will require Elon Musk and Vivek Satanagi to continue their red tape reduction act, eliminating lots of bureaucratic, inefficient government agencies, which will automatically eliminate awkward regulations that do not allow Latin American produce to be exported into the United States, which will provide our countries with the necessary cash so that we come back to our natural partner without the need of seeking opaque financing from China. Marco Rubio also needs to devise a way to overthrow Díaz-Canel and to overthrow Nicolás Maduro and to overthrow Daniel Ortega. Sanctions are not an end in itself. Sanctions should be a means to escalate into classic overthrowing. Since the dictatorships of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua provide the ideological framework for all the drug trafficking affecting the health of United States citizens domestically, and the inclusion of terrorists within the United States territory which are committing crimes, that should be enough to consider the regimes of Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua as a military threat to the United States, so that an old-fashioned intervention is possible. Or, since we are in the 21st century and methods of extraction are more sophisticated than before, it does not necessarily have to be an old-fashioned intervention, but a combination with private mercenary armies such as Eric Prince, in tandem with United States government facilitation. The exact manner of the chirurgical extraction should be determined jointly by the National Security Team of the United States and their allies throughout Latin America. Best allies in Latin America remain President Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, Javier Milei in Argentina, Santiago Abascal in Spain, and Giorgia Meloni in Italy. And that's a good start. All of them are very strong in the countries they represent, and together with Donald Trump, they can make a difference in the rest of the countries in the Americas and Europe to get rid of a left wing that has done nothing but to flood populations of our countries with drugs, terrorism, and woke culture. It will be the work of Santiago Abascal and Giorgia Meloni in Europe to decide which will be their new relationship with Russia. They must understand that the United States can no longer engage in a Cold War with Russia forever, because we are no longer in 1945. We are in 2025 almost, 80 years later. United States foreign policy must concentrate in Latin America. European Union should strengthen internally their military might and establish its own dissuasion against Russia, or maybe they will have to set up better terms of trade. But Europe may no longer expect the United States to establish an iron curtain within Europe, because the United States must deal with its backyard, which is Latin America, in geographical proximity. Europe and West Asia must convene geographically what will be their new boundaries, their new alliances, without so much assistance from the United States. United States isolationists that elected Donald Trump expect the United States to get out of military conflict in Europe and Asia. However, the trade and diplomatic impasse with China and Taiwan remains a huge issue, and it will probably give to Marco Rubio ample opportunities to set out the tone. Looking back at history, Latin American countries such as Paraguay and Central America have historically supported Taiwan rather than mainland China, but mainland China has exerted all its might so that no one recognizes Taiwan. However, Taiwan is democracy. The system of government of Taiwan is the hope for mainland China. Maybe there will be a country somewhere that will recognize Taiwan's existence and form of government as preferable than China. However, that seems not to be the case, because China is now an economic powerhouse. It has been helped by the United States setting up factories in China, which should now be moved to Latin America, which is our domestic continent, and where the return of democracy is more plausible than in China, which seems almost a lost case for humanity. If North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean become a hemispheric block of freedom and capitalism and free thinking and democracy and Republican values, we might together have the necessary might to effectively counter Russia, China, and Iran, which will always try to impose left-wing, woke, drug trafficking, and terrorist culture to populations who just want to be brainwashed as zombies. The ideal human being sought by those genocides are the fentanyl addicted users that you watch in inner cities in the United States with absolute waste of a living. We must counter that culture of death. We must regain life. Promoting abortion is also the culture of death. Declining populations in the United States and Europe, in part, are because of promoting so much abortion. While the Muslim immigration that arrives there do not practice abortion, and that's why they have healthy, growing populations. All cultures have made significant mistakes, and the next few years will be a time for reckoning so that we can save whatever was legated to us by ancient civilizations, to dismiss many shortcomings of modern civilization, and get back on a suitable track for humanity.